So our next presenter, actually two presenters, Oля Belichenko and Valeria Kolosova. And I'm wondering, how are you going to make your presentation? So who will be presenting?
Hello, everyone. It's me who's going to present to give the presentation, but Valeria will be available after it to answer questions if it will be in her expertise. I'm very pleased. It's a big honor to me for me to present today. Thank you, Sayana, and thank to Natalia. I'm not sure she's here, but thanks to her anyway for organizing this. I'm a PhD student in ethnobotany at the University of Ca' Foscari, Venice. And my colleague Valeria is a postdoc there. She's just wrapping up her program there. And it's time to start the presentation. Just bear with me. Okay. And today I'm going to tell you about a plant that attracted our interest 3 years ago. So we started a little investigation about it. So this is the plant. And I'm really curious, maybe somebody who doesn't live in Russia and doesn't have Russian experience every day in their life, do you know this plant? Is there somebody who observe it in the nature and use it somehow?
Yes. Yeah, we have it actually. Yeah.
Yes, but
it's very common in Alaska too. It's a successive plant.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But do you use it somehow? Do you know its name?
I know the name. It's actually in Czech. It's vrpka, so it's also like a little willow, but we don't really use it. It's just growing in the wood.
Okay.
I even buy it and bring it from Siberia to Czech Republic to drink tea. Yeah.
Ah, okay. It's good to know. Okay, thank you for the feedback. So indeed, as you see in the map, this plant is available across the northern hemisphere. You can see it everywhere, even in Italy, according to the map. And I provide here the English names of this plant and the Russian names. It is Ivan chai, Kiprey, and Kaporsky chai. I provide them here because later in the text I'm not going to translate, so that's to keep the diversity of Russian names in the text. And this is a circumpolar species, as I told you, common to large parts of boreal forest and mixed deciduous forest. It is growing in open areas and pastures. Also well-known pioneer species after forest fires and recently cleared land with sandy, gravelly soils. It is incredibly plentiful all across Russia, and it is a very common weed. So you rather consider it a weed rather than something useful. But let's dive in the history of documentation of this plant. And first documentation that we could find is the description of the expedition to Kamchatka of Krasheninnikov and Steller. You can see in the top right the except from Steller description, and just below their description by Bolotov, who probably based also on these materials, who provides the medical uses. And what is important here, I simply wanted to give you an idea of the variety of uses that the researchers first accounted. So it is used mainly for food by local people in Kamchatka. It was used to boil fish and meat. Fresh leaves were used instead of tea, and according to Krasheninnikov, they resembled green tea somehow. But the main use was made out of the inner pith of the stalks, and it was specially prepared and used as a snack and in various talkushas, so mixture of crushed ingredients. And what was probably important for Russian newcomers, it was also a good basis of suslo, from which you could produce kvass, vinegar, and especially wine. Let's go next. Next, it appears in already beginning of 19th century as an ingredient of adulterated Chinese tea. There were two ways of transporting tea from China and India: a sea way and a land way. A land way was called tea transported by land was called Kyakhtinsky because it went through Kyakhta, and it was considered a bit better quality because it better climate and better transporting conditions. And the business of adulterating the Kyakhta tea became so lucrative that you can see that the prices starting from 1-3 rubles per 16 kilograms for pud, extremely cheap, increased to 10 to 20 silver rubles for a kilogram, simply to add a bit of Kaporsky chai into the Chinese tea, so that to increase the volume and to get more money. And here I provide the quote about the technology of creating such tea. The main purpose was simply to make it resemble visually the Chinese tea, and the producers really put a lot of effort into that. And in the map, you can see the main production spots: St. Petersburg, Moscow, and Kazan. From there, it was then transported to Europe. And as early as also beginning of 19th century, they started to ban, of course, this illegal activity. But by the number of days, you can see that it was not so efficient, and despite the fact that people were punished, physically exiled, devoid of the good name, and so on, the repeated bans continued until the end of 19th century. Despite the fact that it was a falsificate, it started also to serve as surrogate, to completely replace the Chinese tea and to be consumed as a cheap replacement Chinese tea by poorer people. So you can see definitions by Dal of Ivan chai and Kaporsky chai. And there is a famous saying, Kaporskaya krosheva и кислое дешево, roughly meaning Kapori hash is sour and cheap, meaning that it's nothing close to Chinese tea, just a cheap surrogate. Probably Dal was so much impressed by the variety of uses of wild herbs in the tea infusions that we see in his later novel, Pavel Alexeyevich Grily. He describes there a morning of Pavel Alexeyevich where he consults with his servant Vanka which herbal infusion to serve today. And Vanka decides that probably Kypre is not the best thing because in times of need, it is consumed in times of need in the absence of something better. So they decided better to drink Chinese tea instead. So we see by this short description that Ivan chai, it's appeared most likely after the introduction of Chinese tea, and it was used to falsify it, and nothing close to traditional and authentic tea, but rather something that is used in times of need and hardship, and hardship did came. The next time when we see next interesting mention of Ivan chai is 1942, the siege of Leningrad. There was almost nothing to eat, and people were trying to make use of any available plant. And Russian botanist Polybin invented the new technology of fermenting Ivan chai so that it resembled more the Chinese tea and could be consumed with better taste qualities as a tea substitute. He says here in the quote that it was quite popular among the population, but honestly, we couldn't find any confirmation of this quote. Maybe you know that. And little interlude about fieldwork, how we got interested in this topic in general. So our project where Valeria and I worked starting from 2018 is the ERC funded project, the Botany of the Divided Generations, which concentrated around the spots where the border has changed across throughout the 20th century. So you can see them in the map. It's Finland and Karelia, where Valeria worked, Pskov, Pechora region next to Estonia, and Estonia itself, where it was my place. Also Polish, Belarus and Lithuanian borderland, and Bukovina. And we found a strikingly similar use of this plant, Ivan-chai, as a tea recently, and it was mostly inspired either the book. Many people were inspired by videos. They tried it, but they never liked it because it was not really tasty, according to me as well. And we decided to check what happened, how they found out about this tea, what is standing behind it. So according to the interviews, you see that there are three groups. Some people told that it is something probably coming from this surrogate tradition, drinking it as a replacement of tea, but it was not many people saying this. And the third groups were saying that, yes, indeed, it is something we tried recently and we fermented. So important part of the new tradition is the technology, which is fermentation, not only drying. And this is an optional part. If I have more time, I will say about the real roots of the tradition. So we came to the media and try to analyze the Google Trends. What is going on with Ivan-chai, Kaporsky chai, and Kyprei according to the search. And we saw that there was soaring interest towards it since 2013. Unfortunately, we couldn't really link it to any event. I tried to look through the events of these years, what happened, except, of course, in 2014, the Crimea, Ukraine, and sanctions and so on. It will appear later. But in fact, Ivan-chai became hyped just before, in 2013. And the most curious thing I could find is that in 2012, there was the year of Chinese tourism in Russia. And the next year, 13, there was year of Russian tourism in China. So I don't know whether it is linked, but simply for consideration. Let's go further. So this hype around Ivan-chai was linked to the numerous sites copying the same story, and also numerous, like dozens of videos showing how to prepare this tea, how to make it ferment, and so on. The narratives about Ivan-chai were quite curious and bizarre. They claim that it's a traditional drink coming from 13th century directly. It was one of the main items for export, and Russia were competing with Britain for this tea. And some claim that there is even an article in Britannica about Ivan-chai. I'm really curious where there is. We couldn't find one. So to make it short, I'm running out of time. There was an attempt to bring Ivan-chai industry on the state level to obtain some governmental support. It didn't come to the federal level, unfortunately, maybe fortunately. But in some regions like Tomsk region, there indeed was some local support from the administration. So the industry started more or less important industry started to be becoming reality. You can see here all different brands of Ivan-chai available in Russia and online. And I couldn't skip the important thing that it is marketed as a food medicine. So important point is that there's no caffeine, so people who cannot drink tea and coffee can use Ivan chai. And it is, judging by the number of medicinal properties, it looks like panacea, really everything you can cure with it. But nevertheless, we couldn't find it neither in the state pharmacopoeia and neither in the nor in the state register of medicinal plants. So it became quite a popular thing for starting from small business and going up to quite a large scale business, which relied on the network of harvesters who received quite little money for 1 kilogram, only 27 rubles, but some people managed to make about several thousands per day, according to the blog posts. And what is important that it grows almost everywhere, as I said, in the north, where you couldn't rely on the agriculture, and it is quite proficient. So it doesn't really depend on, like berries, on the season, on the climate, and so on. And almost every year you can count on quite a good yield, on the same yield. Yes, thank you. I will wrap up. So we identified two interesting streams in this wave of businesses. First is a monastery, so where the network of collectors is actually pilgrims who are coming to a monastery. And another thing is also a New Age commune, which is, I would say, stream of Radnavery, and you would call it new pagans, and quite curious stream from them is Anastasici, who follow the ideas of Vladimir Megre. And you can see the values that attract them to this plant. It's ecologically clean, traditional Russian drink, our Russian identity, and so on and so on. And this map is simply to show you the scale of the production. And to wrap up, thanks to this presentation, we traced the travel of Ivan Chai from Kamchatka and back, having seen the story of first a falsificate and later a surrogate of Chinese tea. The revival of its use is connected with new technology, but also with the reading revolution in the Soviet Union that was described by Stephen Lowell, so that not only the academics obtained the information from the books, but also ordinary people relied a lot and still relying a lot on the information obtained in books. We still don't know what exactly triggered the current popularity of Ivan Chai, but of course, one of the defining factors was the import replacement strategy, which came after the Crimea. 3 years later, after our discovery in the fieldwork, of course, I'm sure we were not the only one who noticed this. The idea of Ivan Chai has been established within Russia. You can find the product is in most chain stores, almost everywhere, and almost in every cafe in large cities, and especially in touristic sites. It has not only become yet another herbal infusion for some national drink, but also sometimes an important small business and the strategy of survival for some, thanks to high profitability and its availability almost everywhere on territory of Russia, which is the zone of risk agriculture. And let's see how the story develops and whether Ivan Chai remains popular in the following years. And here you can see the last year, Russia started to study possibilities of exporting Ivan Chai to China. So it's going vice versa from Russia to China. Well, it's only a plan. We don't know how it turns out. And here's the list of articles where you can read more on medicinal food use and current media hype about Ivan chai. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga and Valery. It's really very exciting story about the many lives and various lives of Ivan chai, because I was probably, as Carrie, were mostly familiar with this historical part of Ivan chai and its role in the Russia-China border trade with tea and the way how it was adulterated. And for me, when I was reading Subotin, the same book you cite, it was quite strange to read that it was not only Ivan chai, it was chai for Ivan. Kind of degrading the level of kind of a folk and kind of let's say that it's really a tea for very poor people who are not able to.
Okay, tea for
afford.
lay person,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, tea for poor tea for Russian poor, let's say. So, and this was very interesting aspect. And it seems to me that Ivan chai is a very good example that of the fluidity of the social life of plants, because they have a period when they're kind of in high demand, and then period when they kind of people forget about it. And of course, it's you very nicely presented it, how it links with the economic situation in the country, with this recent import replacement strategy. But still, for me, it surprises why Ivan chai is so much connected with this present construction of the Russian identity. And is it because if it uses Ivan, or what's the link between this symbolism?
For me, honestly, this is a mystery. I would say this is simply, I wouldn't look for some esoteric reasons why this plant becomes a representative of a national idea. I would rather think about its availability and its plentifulness all around, and the idea that it can be easily converted in a product. But I'm open to ideas and interpretations.
Okay, I see that Tobias is raising his hand. Yeah, Tobias, please.
Yeah, thank you. Very exciting research here. It's actually just a comment on what Sayana said, and I also found it very fascinating, these fluctuations. But because we are talking about a plant, I think we also have to look about the habitat of the plant in terms of fluctuation. And I think this is also part of your Leningrad story. And I know it from German cities and English cities during the Second World War, is because of all those ruins. Like Leningrad, the fireweed was suddenly present in the cities, and I don't know what about wartime uses of fireweed in, let's say, Germany. I have no idea, but there might be also, but might be worth looking at. It's not only like an economy of shortage, but also suddenly there's ruined habitats where, as the succession plans, fireweed kind of settles. It's just a comment.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Yes, Valeria, please.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit on both questions. First of all, about Ivan. Yeah, it is one of the versions that the plant Epilobium Angustifolium is called Ivan chai because it's yes, it's a tea for simple people. I've got a hypothesis. I'm not sure, of course, but I looked at the folk names of Ivan chai of Epilobium in Slavic languages, and as already Martin said, it is Verbówka, yes, or Verbówka in Czech, and also Verbówka in Polish. And in many Slavic languages, the names of Epilobium are derived from the names of stalks. And it cannot be excluded that first it was not Ivan chai, but Eva chai, because the leaves of Angustifolium look very much like leaves of Eva, of Salix, or Verba. And maybe M is just there to escape, to avoid the I'm not sure about, yes, because Eva Chai doesn't sound very, it is not comfortable to pronounce it. But it is my hypothesis, which concerns more language than botany. And talking about its popularity, it is also, yes, it is a mystery, but I would like to add that Russia is not the only country which tells that Ivan Chai is traditional Russian from many centuries back and so on. We had the same, we just had no time to tell about all the language and myths about Ivan Chai because it was connected with the paganic Russian gods, with Peter I, with Adolf Hitler, who tried to destroy the special secret Soviet factory of making Ivan Chai and so on. But there are the same myths and languages in Ukraine, in Belarus, in Estonia, and each country says that Ivan Chai is very traditional ancient drink of this very territory. We tried to understand the mechanism of forming these legends, or city legends, better to say, in one of our articles. But still, you never know what news, what sensation will become very popular. So Ivan Chai is a very brilliant example of such successful stories.
Okay, any other questions, comments? We still have several minutes.
Can I mention something about, because it was really interesting, thank you, Valeria, about Eva Chai. Because if we see Chinese name, Liu Lan, Liu, it's also Eva in Chinese. So this is, in Chinese, it's exactly Eva Chai,
So it is even more than just Slavic group of languages. It is, you can say this is a universal connection. Well, ethnolinguistics also can make some very important impact into botanical studies.
Yes, and for me, it's an interesting discourse that actually wheat, what Caroline was talking about, and Ivan Chai, this is kind of the first plants to start the rewilding of the landscape. Either it was destroyed, for example, like destroyed houses after the war or bombing, or maybe when it was kind of former collective farm fields have been neglected, and you have this suddenly this kind of emergence of wheat and of the Ivan Chai. So
May I also add?
Yes, please.
In the same texts where we read these stories about falsification of Ivan Chai in the 19th century, they were also information about rumors that some people who wants to collect more Ivan Chai, they with purpose burn forests and meadows, expecting that the next year after the fire, Ivan Chai will settle the territory faster, and then we'll get the very rich harvest.
If I may, if we still have a couple of minutes, just a description of a story from the field. We visited Pasika, honey production point, honey production household, and all around it we saw large meadows covered with Ivan Chai. It is known that it is also a very good bee plant. You can have a very good yield of honey from it. And we asked the honey producer whether it is there on purpose or is it a coincidence, on which they told us a story that actually they were quite afraid that competitors or whoever might burn the house or some can put a spark there and burn the forest around it and therefore the house. So they burn sometimes the forest around them, a plot, so that it cannot be burnt like that. It cannot be devastated by fire. A forest fire, which is can also be an occurrence that in that location. So this is simply a natural a coincidence, having a fireweed, which is prevention from a big fire.
Yeah, and taking a power of chair, sorry, it's such an interesting and fascinating topic for me, sadly. At the first slide, you mentioned that it was used by indigenous people in Kamchatka also as a herb for taming of animals.
No. In Kamchatka, it was a food plant and a medicinal plant. And
Okay.
taming animals was mentioned by Bolotov in his economical journal, Экономический магазин, which was partially his own writings and partially a translation from Western mass media. And I could not find his source because in general, these texts looks like a compilation from herbal books. So we should study more attentively Western herbal books, which could be available to educated Russian people at that time.
Because I was thinking in the context of the nomadic Mongolian culture, when you deal with lots of domestic animals, cattle, horses, which needs to be tamed, and wild animals. So I never heard about using Ivan chai, for example, in that part of the region for these purposes. So thank you. Another thing to think about. And thank you